Thanks, folks. I get the privilege of having the last word, which is always good. Just a little tiny bit of background. I'm the project director for ReMSTEP. My background was in high school teaching, and my undergraduate degree many years ago, when I had a dinosaur for a pet, was coastal geomorphology and climatology. So that's where I'm sort of coming from. My research, since I've been in teacher education, has been about learning, teaching, leadership, effective schools, school change, educational policy. It pays to have many bases. It's harder for people to find you. Teachers' professional learning and standards. And what I'd like to do is bring together some of the threads today and some of the points that have been raised. Russell started the day off and talked about some of the concerns over teacher education and STEM, and the concerns about teacher education have been going around for decades, and some of it's misplaced, some of it's mythical, some of it's got some grounding, and concerns about STEM in the broader society more broadly has been of concern too. Obviously the training and effectiveness of maths and science teachers and teacher education is a subset of the above, and it's been particularly problematic because of things like out-of-field teaching, international performance on student measures of achievement and so forth. Continual professional development of teachers has been mentioned. You know, we've got something like 300,000 teachers in Australia. We graduate a small proportion every year, and some of those leave, as we've heard. Departments of education, other stakeholders want quick fix, simple solutions, preferably before the next election. And I've been an advisor to various ministers for education, and they want to know what works quickly, often before you've even had a chance to do it. And so they can go to the electorate and they can say they've tried this and it worked. Initiatives, therefore, you're often evaluating before they've even had a chance to do any work at all. There is a desire for a major step change in maths and science teacher education, and that's probably understandable, but it won't be a simple one-size-fits-all solution. We're dealing with a complex, somewhat intractable, mutually reinforcing cycle, and it starts at early childhood and it goes all the way through to university, and as I said, it's mutually reinforcing. Complex problems usually require complex solutions. There is no one silver bullet. What we do know, though, is some of our previous approaches to these areas have not worked very effectively. For example, give PSTs more content knowledge or practicing teachers, give them more skills, more pedagogy, teacher-proof resources. What we've found is that teacher-proof resources actually repel teachers because basically it's a black box and they haven't had much to do with its development, and if they're feeling self-efficacy problems because they haven't really done the higher levels of maths or science themselves, they weren't really successful in those areas at school, and I'm talking predominantly primary teachers here, then you can understand why people can be deterred by that sort of thing. We've had weak levers for change, and we've had an overcrowded school curriculum, of course, where more and more has been added to it, but at the same time we've had pressure to improve performance on the basics. Often the effective domain's been largely left out of it, and I include here things like attitudes, enjoyment, self-efficacy of students in schools, but also teachers as well. There is the issue that's been raised of professional inertia and reversion to the mean. It's hard to change cultures in schools. It's hard to change what people have done for a long time. But we've also got Einstein's definition of insanity, which is doing the same thing over and over again and hoping for a different result. Well, we've been doing the same things over and over again for a fair while. I think Ian Chubb's challenge to us is a very real one, and he talked about the issues of collaboration and meaningful understanding, mutual understanding, real-world maths and science and so forth, and that's what we've really attempted to do. So if we're going to change anything and make it effective, there are a number of things we need to concentrate on. I'm a former secondary teacher, as I've mentioned, but we've got to start with primary, and in fact we've got to start with early childhood, because we know as kids come into prep, kindergarten, there are already quite substantial developmental gaps. We know that, for example, that where people do have access to early childhood education, that varies. Some people are getting, if you like, an educative type of enjoyment, interaction, intervention. Others, it's more about keeping them occupied. The work of Colette Taylor, for example, showing how they've basically managed to measure the varying impacts and emphases within early childhood education, I think is quite instructive. Certainly, the thing about primary education, that's where the attitudes and the mindsets are set, and often they're set pretty rigidly. Students get views very quickly. Maths is hard, maths is boring, I can't do maths. And those mental barriers are extremely powerful, and they powerfully predict what happens afterwards. And often the sort of responses people are talking about are often remedial in secondary education. You know, yes, you could do some things and improve your Year 9 NAPLAN results, but the seeds of what you're seeing in Year 9 happened many years prior to that. There's a lot about changing knowledge, beliefs, attitudes, approaches to teaching maths and science. You've heard today about we need to concentrate on what scientists and mathematicians really do, which is solving real-world problems, not exercises in a book. You know, I could use the word fracking, for example, and straight away there's a whole lot of things that come to the fore, and they aren't just about science, they're about a whole range of other things as well. The issue of the meaningful, productive collaborations, really respectful, productive, lasting cooperation, mutual understanding is absolutely essential. Keeping the school curriculum up to date, but yet not overloading the school curriculum with those long lists of things that people have to learn is a real challenge. The other one that I keep coming back to, and I've had discussions, as I said, with Ministers for Education, is the whole issue of mandatory versus optional. A lot of the programs I've been involved with, master's degrees, networks of schools, PD, working with individual schools, the people who've been involved in the ReMSTEP project, they're volunteers. They're people who've put their hands up. They've agreed to be involved. And that's a big starting point. But what about the schools? What about the teachers who aren't interested? And the question that we often discuss is, at what point do we intervene in a school, for example, that's going backwards, when so many other schools are powering ahead? At what point do we intervene, and what form does that intervention take? And to make sure that change and innovation and improvement occurs in those schools, do we make rules for everybody that's going to actually stifle innovation? Or do maybe we have a sort of a hierarchy, a triage type system, where certain schools that are going, we give them assistance and help, but we have a light touch on the tiller. Others, we might have more intervention. It's a really important one that we keep coming back to, because we know that when we mandate anything, something happens straight away. It becomes a checklist that has to be ticked off. And once people start ticking off, they engage in what's called satisficing behaviour, which is doing the minimum to keep people off my back. ReMSTEP itself, we've talked about reconceptualising in terms of attitudes and knowledge and approaches and all those sorts of things. It's actually a scientific experiment, but more than that, it's a series of scientific experiments, probably 21, 22, 23, 24, all about developing and implementing and evaluating approaches to overcome some of those problems we've talked about before. And the things that have most impact and the factors responsible for and influencing those impacts. Keeping in mind that human element, and we've heard a number of times how important that is. School culture is important, but the human element too. I've seen so many great programs, I mentioned in the comments I made previously, where someone has left the school and the thing has collapsed because they've taken that energy with them and that knowledge with them and everything else. So, just sharing something with you, one of the areas I said I work in is leadership, and I'll share with you one of my secrets to leadership, which is to work with great people. And I'd like to pay respects, thanks to the people who've been involved with this project, the chief investigators, the project officers, the project manager Daniel, who's not here with us, Bettina and Tim, Albert, Yuan, project team members and the presenters today, the PSTs who've been terrific, the undergraduate students who've been involved, the teachers in schools, the staff here who've helped us organise this, David for hosting today, the members of the other ETMS teams that are here, our reference group members, John, Helen, Will, Paul's here from the department. Where's Nick? There's Nick, just walked in, who's been the main driver in organising this. He's done a great job. And as you've seen from, if you were in the relevant sessions, he was actually involved as one of the scientists in schools. So he's not just a pretty face. So, where to from here? And this is an important one for us because we know the money runs out, and the money's going to run out early next year. So today was about sharing with you some of the impacts and implications, but it's early days yet. We're doing our own evaluation, and that's really ramping up between now and March next year. We have a draft final report due in November. It can't be a final report because some of the things are still happening. We haven't had time to properly evaluate. And evaluate we must. There's a final report due in February. We're hoping to do some dissemination, including a book through ACR Press. Many of the people who've been involved with these projects are keen to actually get that information out there for a variety of reasons, one of which, of course, is their own professional advancement. So our final report won't have the detail that we can provide through some of those individual activities. So we'll be inviting our colleagues to write up those individual activities. We'll also be engaging in meta-analysis, which John was talking about, the higher-level synthesis, bringing things together. We also want to work with the other projects that make up the whole ETMST approach, keeping in mind that time is running out and money's running out, but it's really important that we distill the things that really are important, the things that have worked across those various projects. They've all been quite different, and that's important. It's not one size fits all. The big challenge for us, of course, and our project was about pre-service, but engaging the profession with our findings, and a number of people have mentioned that, and we're very cognizant of that. The issue of induction too, and what happens to people when they get into schools is important. We've got the TMAG agenda, which for those of you who aren't up on that particular acronym, is about basically a Teacher Education Ministerial Advisory Group that reported in 2014, and one of the things they reported on was the need for teacher education programs to demonstrate their quality and impact. So there is a real imperative to follow through our graduates when they get into schools. We want to do it anyway, but it's even more important that we do. It's not just about technology. I know some people think that technology is going to change everything, but technology is very, very useful, but more than ever, it's about people. And it's about teachers who can use technology, not just refer people to it. This guide by the side thing demeans the profession. We need good teachers more than ever to make sense of and use of the technology that's out there. To some degree, the technology is raced ahead of the pedagogy, and we have to address that. There are some big questions, and I've mentioned some of them. Sustainability, what happens when we go? Well, people will move on to other projects and other things. Some people have already done that. Some of the things we've put in place, like subjects and streams and the resources that have been developed, they'll stay there. That'll be great. But we need to continue to nourish, and we've got to find ways to do that. We've got to keep that collaboration and the sharing in mind. And the universities themselves need to encourage and recognise such collaborations. One of the things that happened when this project came to being, and I'm talking about the total ETMST project, was it was classified initially as a Category 1 project, which doesn't mean much to some people, but what it meant was that we ceased to be categorised at the higher elite level, and were categorised as a level 2, Category 2, which is more about applying knowledge than discovering it, and it's more about doing things than research. Well, we can't measure our impact without doing research, but unfortunately, because of that classification, we lost a bit of status within universities. So we really need to work together with our deans and the higher levels in the universities to keep this focus on this important collaboration that we've started. We do need to measure our long-term impact as much as we possibly can across the life cycle of a student, a tertiary student and a teacher. So, we're talking, if we're really going to transform things, we're talking about someone who's coming out of early childhood, through primary, through secondary, going into university, becoming a teacher. It's not the timeline of the next, or the horizon of the next election, unfortunately. We've been asked early on, how long will it take before NAPLAN results improve in Australia as a result of your project? That's a pretty tall order. So, finally, keep in touch. Whatever your role is, you're a stakeholder in all of this. You're important. Give us feedback. Check our website, the great work that Albert's done in setting that up. Check the website for updates and opportunities to be involved. Ask questions. Try some of the stuff. Contact the key people. Do all of those sorts of things. Finally, travel well, and thanks again for attending and for your interest in this whole field, wherever you're coming from. And it's my great pleasure to declare the conference closed. Thank you.